They mocked Alex for adopting two homeless black siblings, Marcu and Amelia. The whispers followed him everywhere: doubt, judgment, even ridicule. But years later, those same people found themselves on their knees, desperate for help from the very family they once shunned. What could possibly have driven the town to such a moment of reckoning, forcing them to confront their own prejudice and seek forgiveness? Before we dive into this compelling story of resilience and redemption, let us know where in the world you're watching from today. And if you find this story inspiring, don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss another tale. Alex Carter's pulse quickened as he stood in the courthouse, its hallowed walls echoing with the quiet shuffle of papers and murmured conversations. At 45, he was at a pivotal moment, balancing between excitement and trepidation. This day marked not just a change in his life, but the beginning of a new chapter defined by love and courage. Today, he would become the father of two young siblings, Marcu and Amelia, children whose lives he'd stumbled upon in heartbreaking circumstances. The judge, a kind-eyed woman with silver hair pulled into a neat bun, cleared her throat, drawing Alex from his thoughts. "Mr. Carter, it is my honor to declare that from this day forward, Marcu and Amelia are officially your children." Her gavel struck once, a simple sound that reverberated with immense significance. A shiver ran down Alex's spine as the gravity of her words settled over him. He turned to look at Marcu and Amelia, who were bundled up in their seats, tiny hands resting on soft blankets, oblivious to the life-altering moment taking place. "Thank you, Your Honor," Alex whispered, his voice almost breaking. He reached down and scooped Amelia into his arms, her dark curls brushing against his cheek as she stirred but did not wake. Marcu, slightly older, blinked up at him sleepily before nestling back into his seat. The room was silent, save for the judge's warm smile. But outside those walls, Alex knew a different kind of silence awaited, a silence punctuated by judgment and skepticism. The drive home was surreal. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the rolling fields that framed the narrow road leading back to town. Alex's thoughts spun like the windmills he passed, shifting between hopeful visions of the life he would build and the grim reality of what that life might entail in his insular community. He glanced in the rearview mirror at Marcu and Amelia, their faces serene, and felt a renewed surge of determination. The following morning, Alex made his first public outing as a father. He carefully dressed Marcu and Amelia, choosing brightly colored clothes that reflected the joy he felt inside. He loaded them into the double stroller and stepped out into the cool, crisp morning air. Main Street bustled with its usual weekend energy, shopkeepers setting up displays, families out for errands, and teenagers clustered near the old soda fountain. As Alex maneuvered the stroller down the sidewalk, he felt the gazes almost immediately. Conversations halted mid-sentence and heads turned, eyes narrowing with subtle disapproval or overt curiosity. He caught snippets of whispers. "Is that Alex Carter?" a woman said, leaning over to her friend. "I heard he's adopted two black children. Can you believe that?" Alex's jaw clenched, but he kept his head high. He had anticipated this reaction. He wasn't naive. The town's history was steeped in tradition, resistant to change or anything that challenged the status quo. Mrs. Peterson, the elderly keeper of community gossip, stood outside the bakery, eyes narrowing as she adjusted her hat. "Shame, really," she muttered loudly, making sure Alex heard. "Those children will never know where they come from." Alex felt the sting of her words like a slap, but he pushed forward, determined not to let it show. His steps faltered only slightly when he passed the familiar faces of former friends who now looked at him with a blend of pity and confusion. The grocery store was no different. The routine task of picking up baby food, diapers, and formula became an exercise in willpower. He stood in the checkout line, Marcu and Amelia babbling softly, their voices the only comforting sound. The cashier, a young woman who usually exchanged pleasantries, seemed caught off guard, her eyes darting between Alex and the children. "Are these?" she started, but her voice trailed off, the unasked question hanging in the air. "Yes," Alex said firmly, his gaze steady. "These are my children." He could see the discomfort flicker across her face before she forced a smile and began scanning items, the beeping of the register punctuating the silence. By the time he loaded the groceries into the car, his hands trembled. The reality of public scrutiny was harsher than he'd imagined. Yet, as he strapped Marcu and Lila into their car seats, their wide eyes filled with innocent trust, Alex felt the weight lift slightly. "We'll be okay," he murmured, more to himself than to them. "I promise you, we'll be just fine." That evening, the chill of the day seeped into the house, but inside, warmth radiated. Alex laid Marcu and Lila in their cribs, each tiny body snug under soft blankets. He lingered for a moment, brushing a stray curl from Lila's face and watching Marcu's chest rise and fall in peaceful sleep. "I'll always protect you," Alex whispered the words, as much a vow as a plea for strength. The weight of the town's judgment pressed against the walls of his small home, but within it, love thrived undeterred. But as whispers turned into more than just words, Alex would soon realize that courage and love alone might not be enough to silence them. Over the next few days, the reality of Alex's new life continued to unfold. The small town seemed to have eyes everywhere, each glance weighted with skepticism or curiosity. The initial stares on Main Street had been just the beginning. Everywhere he went, judgment followed him like an unwelcome shadow. One sunny afternoon, Alex's sister Emily came over for a visit. Her expression was tight as she stepped onto the porch, her eyes flitting nervously to the yard where Marcu and Lila played. The siblings were laughing, their giggles mingling with the chirps of birds and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. To Alex, it was the sound of hope. To Emily, it seemed to highlight her concerns. "Alex," Emily began hesitantly as she settled into the wicker chair next to him. "Are you sure you're ready for this? Raising black children here, in this town, it won't be easy." Her voice wavered, a mix of love and worry. Alex turned to her, eyes shadowed with a mix of exhaustion and resolve. "Emily, I know it won't be easy, but love doesn't recognize color. Marcu and Lila deserve a home, and I'm committed to giving them that." Emily's eyes softened, but her brows remained furrowed. "I just don't want to see you or them hurt. People here, they can be so narrow-minded." Alex reached out and took her hand. "That's exactly why I need to do this. Someone has to show that love is stronger than prejudice. If no one takes the first step, nothing will ever change." Their conversation was interrupted by Marcu toddling over, his small face lit up with excitement. "Look, Uncle Alex, I found a big leaf." He held up his treasure proudly, eyes sparkling. Alex chuckled, the tension in the air easing momentarily. "That's wonderful, Sam." He lifted the boy into his arms, feeling the solid, reassuring weight of him. But the respite was short-lived. The next day at the local diner, Alex walked in, hoping to enjoy a simple cup of coffee. He settled into a booth, but the murmurs began before the server even reached his table. "Did you hear about Alex Carter?" A woman at the next booth whispered to her companion, her voice dripping with disbelief. "He adopted those 2 children, in this town, of all places." Her friend nodded, eyes darting to Alex. "Those poor kids, how will they ever fit in here?" Alex pretended not to hear, his heart hardening at their words. He sipped his coffee, the once comforting warmth now tainted with the bitterness of their judgment. The server approached, eyes flitting nervously to the children's photos he kept in his wallet, barely meeting his gaze as she took his order. At church that Sunday, Alex felt both anticipation and dread. He needed the solace that his faith brought, but he feared the conversations that would follow. After the service, Pastor Reynolds approached him, brow furrowed with concern. "Alex, I've heard about your adoption. It's a noble thing, truly," he said, his tone careful. "But have you considered the challenges those children will face here? Maybe it would be kinder to find them a home in a more diverse community." Alex squared his shoulders, meeting the pastor's eyes. "Pastor, I've thought of everything. But I believe that love and steadfastness can change hearts and minds. Marcu and Lila are my children now, and this is their home. We'll face whatever challenges come our way, together." Pastor Reynolds' eyes softened, respect flickering behind the worry. "I admire your conviction, Alex, I truly do. I'll pray for your strength." Alex nodded, exchanging a small balm for his weary spirit. That night, as he tucked Marcu and Lila into their cribs, he whispered his nightly promise. "I'll always love you, no matter what anyone says or thinks. We are a family, and nothing will ever change that." But even Alex's determination would be tested in ways he never anticipated, as the town's attitudes began to impact his children directly. As weeks passed, the whispers and sidelong glances turned into a familiar backdrop of Alex's daily life. He adapted, growing resilient in the face of disapproving looks, but what he hadn't anticipated was the impact on Marcu and Lila. The children were still young, their innocence a buffer against the harshness of the world, but Alex knew it was only a matter of time before they started noticing the subtle hostility around them. One morning, Alex decided to take Marcu and Lila to the local playground. The sun was bright, casting a warm glow over the swings and slides. The children's laughter echoed as they chased each other, their giggles ringing out like music. For a moment, Alex allowed himself to believe they were just another family enjoying a sunny day. But then, a group of parents gathered near the benches and shifted their attention toward Alex and the children. One mother leaned into another, eyes darting toward Marcu and Lila. "I don't understand why he'd do that," she whispered, loud enough for Alex to catch. "What's going to happen when they're older and realize they don't fit in?" Alex felt the familiar sting, his heart tightening in his chest. He turned away, focusing on the joy in Marcu's eyes as he reached the top of the slide. "Look, Daddy, watch me," Marcu called, his grin wide and carefree. "I'm watching, buddy," Alex called back, forcing a smile. As Marcu slid down, squealing with delight, Alex's heart swelled with love and protectiveness. These moments were worth the judgment, he reminded himself. The atmosphere at the playground grew colder as parents began to gather their children and leave. A boy that Lila had been playing with was suddenly pulled away by his mother. Lila's smile faded, confusion clouding her eyes as she watched her new friend disappear across the park. "Daddy?" she asked, her voice small. "Why did he have to go?" Alex bent down, brushing a curl from her forehead. "Sometimes people leave without a reason that makes sense, sweetie. But it's not your fault, okay?" Lila nodded slowly, but her bright eyes were shadowed with disappointment. Alex swallowed his frustration, determined not to let his children see his pain. At home that evening, Emily dropped by with a plate of cookies. She watched as Alex busied himself in the kitchen, the tension in his shoulders unmistakable. "Alex, are you okay?" she asked, setting the plate on the counter. The room smelled of cocoa and cinnamon, but the warmth it should have brought felt distant. Alex sighed, leaning against the counter. "I'm tired, Em. Tired of fighting this invisible battle every day. Marcu and Lila are starting to notice, and I don't know how to shield them from it." Emily reached out, placing a reassuring hand on his arm. "You're doing everything you can, and more. They're lucky to have you." The sincerity in her voice eased some of the tightness in his chest. "Thanks, Emily. I just want them to grow up knowing they're loved, even if some people can't see past their own narrow views." A week later, Alex's resolve was put to the test when he enrolled Marcu in a local daycare. It was important for Marcu to interact with children his age, but the first day brought new challenges. When Alex picked Marcu up in the afternoon, he noticed his son's usually bright demeanor had dimmed. "How was your day, champ?" Alex asked, ruffling Marcu's hair as they walked to the car. Marcu glanced down, his small hands twisting nervously. "Some kids didn't want to play with me," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "They said I'm different." Alex's heart clenched, anger and sadness warring within him. He knelt down, looking into Marcu's eyes, which mirrored his own pain. "Listen to me, Marcu. Different isn't bad. You are special. And anyone who can't see that is missing out. Okay?" Marcu nodded, his lip trembling, but the shadow of doubt lingered. That night, as Alex tucked his son into bed, he whispered a promise that echoed deeper than ever. "No matter what, we face everything together. You are loved, and that will never change." Despite Alex's words, the town's prejudice would soon become more than just whispers. It would challenge the very bond he had fought so hard to build. Bookmark. As Marcu and Lila grew, so did the challenges that Alex faced as their father. The small, insidious ways the town's prejudice seeped into their daily life became more apparent. The true test came when Marcu reached school age. It was a milestone Alex had looked forward to with a mix of pride and anxiety, knowing that his son's experiences there would shape him in ways even love at home might struggle to mend. The first day of school was crisp and bright, the air filled with the excited chatter of children and the nervous energy of parents. Alex held each of his children's hands tightly as they approached the school building, Marcu clutching his backpack and Lila, who was still too young for school, bouncing beside them. "You ready, big guy?" Alex asked Marcu, who looked up with wide eyes, a mix of excitement and uncertainty playing across his face. Marcu nodded slowly. "I think so, Dad." "You're going to do great," Alex said, his voice steady, willing the words to bolster both of them. He gave Marcu's hand a final squeeze before leading him into the classroom, where rows of bright desks and cheerful posters lined the walls. Children were settling in, and Marcu found an empty seat near the front. As Alex watched, other parents exchanged pleasantries or offered encouraging smiles to their own children. But when his gaze swept over the room, he caught several pairs of eyes quickly averting. The teacher, Mrs. Hill, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, approached Alex. "Mr. Carter, Marcu is in good hands," she said, offering a warm smile. "I'm looking forward to having him in my class." Alex's chest eased a fraction. "Thank you, Mrs. Hill. I know he's excited to learn." Leaving the school felt like leaving a piece of his heart behind. He walked Lila to the car, her chattering voice a welcome distraction from the weight on his mind. But later that day, when he picked Marcu up, the smile he'd hoped to see was nowhere in sight. "How was your first day?" Alex asked, trying to keep his tone light as they buckled into the car. Marcu shrugged, looking out the window. "It was okay. Some kids wouldn't sit next to me, though." The casualness with which Marcu said it broke Alex's heart. He reached over and squeezed his son's shoulder. "I'm sorry, Sam. Sometimes people don't understand things that are different, but that doesn't mean you're not amazing." Marcu nodded, but the doubt in his eyes haunted Alex. That evening, Marcu was quieter than usual. Lila noticed and clambered onto the couch next to him, offering one of her dolls. "You can play with Lucy if you want," she said in her tiny, sweet voice. A small smile tugged at Marcu's lips. "Thanks, Lila." Alex watched from the kitchen, pride swelling at the way they comforted each other, even if they didn't fully understand why it was needed. Just as the Carter family found moments of solace at home, outside forces threatened to deepen the challenges Marcu and Lila faced. And Alex would soon have to confront whether love alone could shield them from the world's harshest truths. Bookmark. As weeks turned into months, the realities of school life began to weigh heavily on Marcu. Though he excelled in reading and math, and his teachers praised his polite demeanor, there was an unspoken barrier between him and many of his classmates. Alex noticed it in the small details, the way Marcu's smile faltered when talking about recess, or how his drawings always depicted himself playing alone. It broke Alex's heart, but he knew he couldn't shield Marcu from everything. The best he could do was prepare him to face it. One afternoon, Alex's phone rang, and the principal's name flashed on the screen. A chill ran down his spine as he answered. "Mr. Carter, this is Principal Weaver. We had an incident at school today involving Marcu." Alex's grip tightened on the phone. "Is he okay? What happened?" There was a pause, long enough to stretch his nerves taut. "He's physically fine, but there was an altercation. Some children said hurtful things to him, and it led to a confrontation. It might be best if you came in so we can discuss this." Within minutes, Alex was at the school. When he walked into the principal's office, he found Marcu sitting with his head bowed, cheeks flushed with embarrassment, and eyes downcast. Alex's heart ached as he took the seat beside his son. "Marcu, do you want to tell your dad what happened?" Principal Weaver's voice was gentle but firm. Marcu glanced up, tears shimmering. "They said I didn't belong here, Dad. That I shouldn't be in their class." Alex felt anger surge, hot and quick, but he pushed it down, focusing on Marcu. "I'm so sorry you had to hear that, buddy," he said, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "But what you need to remember is that you do belong. Don't ever doubt that." Principal Weaver nodded. "We'll be addressing this with the parents involved, Mr. Carter. I assure you, we're committed to making our school a safe place for all students." Alex appreciated the principal's effort, but couldn't shake the fear gnawing at him. Words, he knew, could cut deeper than anything physical. The journey ahead wasn't just about protecting Marcu and Lila. It was about preparing them to stand tall despite the world's ignorance. At home that evening, Alex sat Marcu and Lila down. Lila, sensing her brother's quiet pain, climbed onto Alex's lap, her small hands clutching his shirt. "Daddy, why was Sammy sad today?" she asked, her voice full of innocent concern. Alex looked at their faces, so young and trusting, and felt the weight of the explanation he owed them. Sometimes people don't understand that we're all different, but still the same in the ways that matter most, he said carefully. And when they don't understand, they say things that aren't kind. But I need you both to know that different is beautiful, and love makes us strong. Marcu's eyes, though still tinged with doubt, held a flicker of hope. Will it always be like this, Dad? He asked, his voice almost a whisper. Alex took a deep breath. I hope not, Sam. But no matter what, we'll face it together. We're a family, and that makes us stronger than any unkind word. Despite the hardships, Alex's resolve to teach his children resilience would soon bring unexpected changes, not just to their family, but to the entire town. As winter settled in, a deep chill hung over the small town, both in temperature and in the way people treated the Carter family. Yet, within the Carter home, warmth thrived. Alex made sure Marcu and Lila knew they were loved beyond measure, wrapping them in layers of kindness and stories that fueled their dreams. Even on the toughest days, their small home resonated with laughter and hope. Marcu's resilience became clearer as he immersed himself in books and stories of heroes who faced adversity and triumphed. One evening, as snowflakes spiraled gently past the window, Alex found him curled up on the couch, a book spread across his lap. Lila sat beside him, eyes wide as Marcu explained the story in his animated way. And then, the hero didn't give up, even when everyone said he would fail, Marcu said, his voice lifting with excitement. Lila clapped her hands, her giggles infectious. Just like you, Sammy. You're the hero. Alex watched from the doorway, pride swelling in his chest. These moments were what kept him going, the proof that love was building an unbreakable foundation in his children. But outside, the whispers hadn't ceased. The tension in the town simmered like an unspoken storm waiting to break. One day, the quiet strain in the community erupted when an unexpected flu outbreak swept through the town. People fell ill quickly, and entire families were unable to care for themselves. Despite years of whispered judgments and exclusion, Alex couldn't stand by and watch his neighbors suffer. It was time to show that kindness could break through even the most ingrained prejudice. Kids, Alex said one morning, pulling on his coat and turning to Marcu and Lila, who were bundled up and ready. We're going to visit some families who need help. I've made some soup and gathered supplies. I need you both to be my helpers. Lila's eyes sparkled with pride. We'll be the best helpers ever, Daddy. Marcu, now older and more aware of the town's complexities, nodded seriously. We'll help, Dad, he said, the determination in his voice mirroring Alex's. Their first stop was the home of the Jenkins family, one of the most vocal critics of Alex's decision to adopt Marcu and Lila. Mrs. Jenkins answered the door, her face pale and drawn, the lines of fatigue etched deep around her eyes. She blinked in surprise at the sight of Alex and the children on her porch. Alex, she said, her voice weak with confusion. Why are you? We heard you were unwell, Alex interrupted gently. We brought some things to help. Mrs. Jenkins hesitated, eyes darting between Alex and Marcu. For a moment, the weight of years of judgment and prejudice seemed to hang in the air. Then, with a shaky breath, she stepped aside, allowing them in. As Alex set the pot of soup on the stove and Marcu unpacked medicines and blankets, Lila hummed a cheerful tune, oblivious to the tension. Slowly, Mrs. Jenkins' posture softened, the lines of weariness on her face easing. Thank you, she whispered, tears gathering in her eyes. I don't deserve this kindness after. Alex met her gaze, his expression one of quiet resolve. Kindness isn't about deserving, Mrs. Jenkins. It's about what's right. Word of Alex's selfless acts spread through the town and carried on the lips of families who had once whispered against him. It didn't happen overnight, but the barrier between the Carter family and their community began to crack. As the town witnessed unexpected acts of compassion, seeds of change took root. But would they be enough to shift long-held beliefs? The days following the flu outbreak were marked by quiet transformations in the small town. The Carter family's act of generosity became the talk of Main Street, carried from porch to porch and whispered over fences. The town's collective memory of their prejudice clashed with the new reality. Alex, Marcu, and Lila were more than just subjects of curiosity. They were part of the community. One afternoon, while Alex and the children were out running errands, an older man with a stiff gait approached them outside the general store. Mr. Wilkins, who had often turned his back on Alex during church and avoided eye contact at the market, stood with an uncertain expression. "Mr. Carter," he said, clearing his throat and glancing nervously at Marcu and Lila. "I heard what you did for the Jenkins family, and the Thompsons. It was admirable." Alex paused, the grocery bag in his hand suddenly feeling heavier. "Thank you, Mr. Wilkins," he replied, not unkindly but with a touch of guardedness. Marcu and Lila, sensing the subtle tension, stayed close to their father's side. "I was wrong," Mr. Wilkins said after a moment, his voice barely above a whisper, "about a lot of things." Alex met the man's gaze, surprised by the emotion behind his words. It was a small step, but a significant one. He nodded a brief but understanding gesture before continuing on with the children. That evening, as they sat around the kitchen table, Marcu recounted the interaction with wide eyes. "Dad, do you think people will really change?" he asked, hope mingled with doubt in his voice. Alex reached across the table, resting his hand over Marcu's. "I think people can change if they choose to, Sam, and sometimes it takes seeing kindness when they least expect it to make them realize what's possible." Over time, the town's icy exterior began to thaw. Neighbors who had once crossed the street to avoid the Carters now offered nods of acknowledgement. Mrs. Peterson, the notorious gossip, even paused at their gate one morning, unsure but visibly trying. "Good morning, Alex. Kids," she said, her tone faltering. Marcu and Lila exchanged glances, a flicker of disbelief passing between them before they shyly waved. "Good morning, Mrs. Peterson," Alex replied, the warmth in his voice genuine. As the town slowly shifted, so too did the experiences of Marcu and Lila. At school, Marcu noticed fewer children turning away from him. One day, a boy named Henry, who had been among those who ignored Marcu at recess, approached him during lunch. "Hey, do you want to play soccer with us?" Henry asked, fidgeting with his shoelaces. Marcu blinked in surprise, his tray of food forgotten. Yeah, I'd like that," he said, the simple invitation sending a wave of relief through him. That night, Marcu's excitement was palpable. "Dad, I played soccer today, and Henry passed me the ball." He bounced on his chair, eyes bright with a joy Alex hadn't seen in weeks. Alex smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "See, change can happen, buddy, and you being you is a big part of why." Lila, ever the little cheerleader, clapped her hands. "Go Sammy," she shouted, making everyone at the table laugh. Yet, as the town began to change, deeper tests of forgiveness and acceptance lay ahead, ones that would challenge the very fabric of their newfound unity. Bookmark. As winter melted into spring, a tangible shift began to ripple through the town. The playgrounds that once echoed with hushed conversations now had moments filled with laughter that included Marcu and Lila. Their hesitant acceptance by classmates grew into genuine friendships, nurtured by the quiet resilience that Alex had instilled in them. Yet, the echoes of old prejudices still lingered in pockets of the community, waiting to resurface at the slightest provocation. One Sunday after church, Marcu sat with his father and Lila at the community potluck. The event, long a staple of town gatherings, had always been a place where people exchanged recipes and caught up on the latest news. For years, the Carters had either been absent or kept to themselves. But this year felt different. As Alex reached for a slice of apple pie, Mrs. Thompson, one of the town's more outspoken critics, approached their table. She held a casserole dish in her hands and wore an uncertain smile. "Alex, I thought you might like to try this. It's my famous green bean casserole," she said, her voice wavering slightly. Alex's surprise was mirrored in Marcu's wide eyes. "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson," Alex said, taking the dish with genuine gratitude. Marcu watched, half expecting the moment to dissolve into awkward silence. But instead, Mrs. Thompson stayed, shifting from foot to foot. "I've been meaning to say, the way you helped during the flu outbreak. It made me realize I hadn't been fair. Not to you or to the children," she admitted, her cheeks flushing with what might have been embarrassment or relief. Alex's chest tightened, not with anger, but with a deep-seated understanding. "Thank you for saying that," he replied, his voice gentle. The moment was broken by Lila's giggle, as a friend from school waved her over to play. Marcu nudged his sister, grinning as she darted off, her pigtails bouncing. Mrs. Thompson watched them with a faraway look, then nodded before heading back to her own table. The conversation weighed on Marcu, whose mind was a whirl of thoughts and emotions. That night, after Lila had been tucked into bed and the house was cloaked in the soft hum of nighttime, Marcu sat beside Alex on the couch. "Dad, do you think people like Mrs. Thompson really mean it when they apologize?" Marcu asked, the question heavy with both hope and doubt. Alex looked at his son, seeing the blend of wisdom and innocence that made his heart ache with pride. "Sometimes, Sam, people realize they've been wrong and want to change. It's not always easy to trust that change, but forgiveness can be as powerful as kindness. It doesn't mean we forget, but it helps us move forward." Marcu nodded slowly, the gears turning in his mind. "Is that why you never got mad at them, even when they said things?" Alex exhaled, the weight of years rolling off his shoulders. "I chose not to let anger take up space in my heart because I wanted to show you and Lila that love is stronger. And that's not just words, it's a choice I make every day." Marcu leaned against Alex, comforted by his father's steady presence. The truth sank in, not just as an explanation, but as a way to live. Just as the Carters began to embrace the town's changes, an unexpected event would test the depths of their capacity for forgiveness and strength. The gentle optimism that had started to thread its way through the town was tested sooner than anyone could have anticipated. One late spring evening, a knock on the Carter family's door disrupted the quiet hum of homework and bedtime routines. Alex answered, surprised to find Mr. Wilkins, who had once been among the town's most critical voices, standing with a weathered hat in hand and eyes clouded by worry. "Mr. Carter," he started, shifting uneasily on the porch. "I wouldn't come here unless I really needed to, but it's my grandson. He's been sick for days, and we can't seem to get the right help. I heard your daughter has quite the knack for caring for others." Alex's heart softened as he recalled the once icy encounters with Mr. Wilkins. The man's face was now lined with desperation and humility. Without hesitation, Alex nodded. "Come in, Mr. Wilkins. We'll do what we can." Amelia, now a teenager with a burgeoning interest in medicine, hurried down the hall as Alex called for her. She recognized Mr. Wilkins and paused, surprise flickering across her face. He'd been one of the hardest to win over, his judgment having shadowed many of her childhood memories. But she quickly pushed the thoughts aside and listened as he explained the situation. "I'll come with you," she said, determination lighting her eyes. She grabbed her first aid kit, a well-stocked collection that spoke to her passion for helping others. "Dad, can you drive us?" In the car, Marcu sat beside Amelia, their shared silence a testament to the gravity of the moment. The roads were dark, lined with trees that whispered in the breeze, their branches casting long, shifting shadows. They arrived at Mr. Wilkins' modest house, where his daughter and young grandson waited anxiously. The boy lay on a couch, his cheeks flushed with fever. Amelia approached him with a calm assurance, asking questions, taking his temperature, and soothing him with practiced ease. "Thank you for coming," Mr. Wilkins' daughter whispered to Alex, eyes glistening with gratitude and lingering surprise. "I didn't know who else to turn to." "No need to thank us," Alex said softly. "We're here to help, no matter what." Amelia worked diligently, applying cold compresses and helping the family follow a treatment plan. The boy's breathing eased, and his eyes fluttered open, catching the room's dim light. As relief washed over the family, Mr. Wilkins stood in the corner, watching Amelia with an expression that shifted from awe to remorse. "Dr. Davidson," he muttered, almost to himself, the words foreign yet sincere. Before they left, Mr. Wilkins reached out, catching Amelia's attention. "I owe you, and your family, more than an apology. I owe you gratitude and respect." Amelia met his gaze, seeing for the first time not the man who had judged her father, but one who was trying to make amends. She nodded, her heart swelling with the lessons her father had instilled in her about forgiveness and empathy. "We're glad your grandson is okay, Mr. Wilkins." The drive home was silent, but it was a silence filled with peace. Alex glanced at his children in the rearview mirror, pride blooming in his chest. Marcu leaned his head against Amelia's shoulder, eyes closing as the rhythmic hum of the tires lulled him to sleep. "Good job today," Alex said, his voice breaking the stillness. Amelia smiled tiredly, a nod all the response he needed. The The Carters' willingness to help had begun to change more than just one family. It was slowly weaving a new narrative through the town, one that would soon come full circle in the most unexpected way. Bookmark. Go back. The morning after their late-night visit to Mr. Wilkins' house, the news of Amelia's quiet heroics had spread faster than spring flowers blooming after a long frost. Neighbors who once watched the Carters with skeptical eyes now spoke in hushed tones tinged with admiration. The change was slow but undeniable, like the thawing of ice that finally allowed a river to flow. Alex felt the shift during simple errands, an extra nod at the store, a smile from someone who used to avert their gaze. Yet, it was at the school's annual parent-teacher night that the transformation truly took shape. The halls of the elementary school buzzed with chatter as parents and teachers exchanged pleasantries. Alex walked beside Marcu and Amelia, both clutching their father's hands. The nervous energy in the air reminded him of the first parent-teacher night he attended when Marcu was younger, where the glances were anything but welcoming. Marcu led the way to his classroom, where Mr. Barnes, his teacher, greeted them with a genuine smile. "Mr. Carter, Marcu's been doing great. His project on community heroes was quite the hit." Alex's eyebrows lifted in surprise. "Community heroes?" Marcu, slightly embarrassed, looked at his feet. "I wrote about you, Dad, and Amelia too." Warmth flooded Alex's chest, making his heart swell with pride. "I'd love to see it," he said, eyes misting over. Marcu beamed and pointed to a display on the wall that featured drawings, photos, and written essays from the students. His project was front and center, a picture of their home with the words, "My dad and sister are my heroes," scrawled in his careful handwriting. Other parents moved closer, their expressions softening as they read Marcu's essay. Whispers hummed through the crowd, not the sharp-edged kind that once followed the Carters, but something different. The ice that had held their community in place was breaking apart, piece by piece. A familiar voice caught Alex's attention. "Mr. Carter," came the tentative call of Mrs. Larson, who had been distant ever since his adoption of Marcu and Amelia. She shifted uncomfortably, then gestured at the project. "Your family? You've shown us something important. I just wanted to say thank you." Marcu's eyes darted between his dad and Mrs. Larson, the significance not lost on him. Alex inclined his head, his gratitude unspoken but understood. "It means a lot, Mrs. Larson," he said, his voice steady. The moment carried into the next week when the mayor himself reached out to the Carters. The town was planning a community event to celebrate local stories of resilience and kindness, and the Carter family's name was at the top of the list. Alex, though initially hesitant, recognized the chance to share the lessons that had carried them through dark times. The night of the event arrived with clear skies and warm air. The town square was transformed with twinkling lights and banners that proclaimed messages of unity and hope. A stage had been set up near the fountain where speeches and performances would take place. Alex stood with Marcu and Amelia on either side of him, their eyes wide with wonder at the bustling crowd. Mayor Rodriguez stepped up to the podium, clearing his throat. "Tonight, we celebrate not just a town that has endured, but a town that has learned and grown," he began, his voice carrying across the square. "And no story exemplifies this more than the journey of the Carter family." A soft murmur rippled through the crowd as eyes turned to Alex and his children. Marcu squeezed his father's hand, and Alex felt the weight of years of struggle lift just a little more. "We've learned that strength isn't always loud," the mayor continued. "Sometimes it's in the quiet actions of a father who stood firm in love, or a young girl who helped others with compassion, or a boy who reminds us what true heroism looks like." Amelia, standing to the side, felt a rush of warmth as the crowd broke into applause. She exchanged a glance with Alex, their eyes saying what words never could. This is why we kept going. But as the evening progressed, one last surprise waited to bring the Carter family's journey full circle, proving that true change begins with a single act of unwavering kindness. The applause that filled the town square echoed in Alex's ears, a sound so different from the silence that once surrounded him and his children. As the crowd's cheers subsided, Mayor Rodriguez motioned for Alex to join him at the podium. Taking a deep breath, Alex stepped forward, Marcu and Amelia at his sides, and felt the gaze of familiar faces, some that had once avoided his, now filled with warmth and respect. Alex's voice was steady but tinged with emotion as he spoke. "Thank you for this moment. It's not one I ever expected when I decided to become a father to Marcu and Lila. Back then I believed that love would be enough to overcome anything. And while love has been the cornerstone, I learned that resilience, kindness, and forgiveness were equally essential." He paused, looking out at the crowd, seeing Mrs. Thompson, Mr. Wilkins, and others who had once been wary but now seemed different, softer, more open. "Our journey hasn't been easy, but it has shown me that change, no matter how slow, is possible. It starts with one person, one act of kindness, one moment of understanding." Marcu shifted closer to his father, the pride in his young eyes visible to everyone. "And it continues with people willing to stand together." A murmur of agreement swept through the audience, punctuated by claps and nods. But the night held one more surprise. Just as Alex began to step back, Mrs. Larson approached the stage, her face pale but determined. She held a small bundle of letters in her hands, trembling as she faced the Carters. "Alex," she began, her voice cracking. "These are letters my husband and I wrote to each other when we were young, sharing dreams about what kind of town we wanted to live in. I think we lost sight of those dreams until your family reminded us." Her gaze shifted to Marcu and Lila, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I'm sorry for the years I spent on the wrong side of change." Alex took the letters, his fingers brushing against hers as a quiet understanding passed between them. "Thank you, Mrs. Larson. That means more than you know." Amelia watched the exchange, her heart swelling with emotion. Beside her, Marcu stood taller, as if the acceptance that had been so hard-won was finally tangible. The whispers of exclusion were now whispers of admiration and respect. As the event came to a close, townspeople who once avoided the Carters now approached with apologies and kind words. Mr. Wilkins, leaning on his cane, caught Alex's eye and nodded, his expression softened with gratitude and humility. Even Mrs. Peterson, the gossip who had once scoffed at Alex on Main Street, extended a warm handshake and a tearful smile. "You proved me wrong," she said quietly, almost to herself. Marcu, hearing her words, felt a rush of pride not just in his father, but in himself. He turned to Alex, eyes bright with emotion. "Dad, we did it, didn't we?" Alex wrapped an arm around Marcu's shoulders and pulled Amelia closer. "Yes, Sam, we did." As they walked home under the soft glow of the streetlights, the Carters knew that the path they had walked, once fraught with isolation, was now a road shared with a town that had learned to change, one small step at a time. The weeks following the community event brought a new chapter to the town's story. The Carters' unwavering kindness had lit a spark that burned away the old prejudices like mist under the morning sun. Main Street, once filled with wary glances, now bustled with genuine greetings and conversations. People who had once kept their distance now waved and smiled as Alex passed by with Marcu and Lila. Marcu thrived in school, not just as a student, but as a friend and a leader. The children who had once kept their distance now flocked to him during recess, eager to play soccer or listen to his stories. One afternoon, he walked home with Henry, the boy who had invited him to play for the first time months earlier. They laughed and kicked a ball back and forth, the echoes of their joy ringing out along the street. "You're really good at soccer, Sam," Henry said, his voice full of admiration. Marcu grinned, a warm flush spreading across his cheeks. "Thanks, we should start a team one day." Across town, Lila's friendships blossomed too. Her infectious laughter and gentle heart made her a favorite among her peers, and soon, birthday party invitations that had once skipped over the Carters' mailbox began to arrive in droves. Each one was a symbol of change, small but significant, like the first buds of spring after a long winter. One Saturday, as Alex sat on the porch reading the morning paper, he noticed Mrs. Larson approaching with her young granddaughter in tow. The girl, a shy child named Ellie, held a basket of cookies that she clutched nervously. "Hello, Mr. Carter," Mrs. Larson said, a hint of embarrassment still coloring her voice. Ellie wanted to thank Amelia for helping her with her project on first aid. Ellie stepped forward, eyes wide with shyness, and handed Alex the basket. "Thank you, Mr. Carter," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex smiled, taking the basket from her small hands. "Amelia will love these. Thank you, Ellie." Behind them, Amelia appeared in the doorway, a bright smile on her face as she noticed Ellie. "Hey, Ellie, did you finish your project?" The girl nodded, her expression brightening. "I did. And I got an A." "That's amazing," Amelia said, stepping down to give Ellie a high five. Mrs. Larson watched the exchange with eyes that shone with pride, no longer clouded by the old prejudice that had once kept her at a distance. Moments like these became more common as the months passed. The town's transformation wasn't just reflected in the people, but in the places too. The local school added a new mural painted by students. A scene full of diverse, smiling faces under the words, "Together, we are strong." Businesses that once catered to the familiar now embraced new patrons and ideas, their signs reflecting unity and warmth. Even Alex felt the change in his daily life. When he walked into the local diner one morning, instead of awkward silences, he was met with greetings and nods. Mrs. Peterson, who had once been the voice of disapproval, even brought him a slice of pie on the house. "For you and the kids," she said, her voice softened by a smile that was tentative but real. Alex chuckled, accepting it. "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson." As the days turned into years, the Carters' story became woven into the fabric of the town's history, a reminder that change was not only possible, but necessary. Alex watched Marcu and Leila grow with pride. Amelia's dedication to medicine deepened, and Marcu's passion for justice sharpened as he dreamed of following in his father's footsteps, not just as a man who overcame odds, but as one who inspired others to do the same. The town's journey was far from over, but as the Carters sat together on their porch one warm summer evening, they knew that the path ahead was one they would walk with the support of a community that had finally opened its heart. The years flowed steadily, bringing new milestones and moments that redefined the bonds between Alex, Marcu, and Leila. As time wove its intricate patterns, the town itself evolved, embodying the lessons learned through the struggles and triumphs of the Carter family. This was never more evident than when the community came together for an annual charity event, one that Amelia had been asked to lead as a testament to her growing role in the town as a promising medical student. The town hall buzzed with energy as townspeople of all ages filed in, the air thick with anticipation. Amelia stood at the podium, wearing her crisp white coat for the first time in an official capacity, the proud glow on her face mirrored by the warm lights overhead. Beside her sat Alex and Marcu, both beaming as they watched Amelia prepare to speak. "Good evening, everyone," Amelia began, her voice steady and confident. The crowd hushed, all eyes fixed on the young woman who had once been the child they whispered about. "Tonight, we come together not just to raise funds, but to celebrate what makes our community strong: compassion, resilience, and unity." Applause rippled through the room, and Alex felt a familiar sting of emotion at the corners of his eyes. He glanced sideways at Marcu, who nodded at his sister with pride. Marcu had grown into a formidable young man with dreams of law school, driven by a fire to defend those who needed a voice. Amelia continued, sharing stories of patients she had helped, emphasizing how acts of kindness and empathy could bridge even the widest divides. Among the crowd, Mrs. Larson and Mr. Wilkins listened with rapt attention, their faces a testament to their own journeys of change. "Many of you know my father," Amelia said, her voice softening as she looked at Alex. "He taught Marcu and me that love is more powerful than any prejudice or fear, and it is because of his example that we stand here tonight as a family, grateful to be part of a community that has grown with us." The audience erupted in applause, the sound a symphony of shared acknowledgement and respect. Alex's chest swelled, not just with pride for Amelia's accomplishments, but with the knowledge that the love he had fought so hard to protect had not only survived, but flourished. When the speeches ended, townspeople mingled, exchanging stories and plans for future projects. Marcu found himself surrounded by friends and adults who spoke to him not as the boy who once sat alone, but as a young man whose opinions mattered. "Marcu," Mayor Rodriguez called out, approaching with a handshake. "I heard you're preparing for law school. I have no doubt you'll do great things." Marcu smiled, the words igniting a spark in his chest. "Thank you, Mayor. I'm looking forward to making a difference." Meanwhile, Alex stood near the refreshments table, accepting warm greetings and sincere thanks. He spotted Mrs. Peterson weaving her way toward him, her usual stiffness replaced by a warm, if shy, smile. "Alex," she said. At Alex her scarf nervously. "I just wanted to say, I wish I'd seen the good in your family sooner. You've shown us what real strength looks like." Alex reached out, clasping her hand gently. "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. It's never too late to choose kindness." Amelia and Marcu joined him a moment later, Lila racing up with a plate of cookies, her cheeks flushed from running. They laughed together, a sound that floated above the room, binding them to the new reality of acceptance they had helped build. As they left the town hall under the soft glow of streetlights, Alex felt the reassuring weight of Marcu's arm around his shoulders and Amelia's hand in his. They had changed the town, and the town had changed them. But most importantly, they had built a legacy that would guide future generations toward love, no matter the obstacles. With the charity event behind them, life settled into a new, hopeful rhythm for the Carter family. Marcu prepared for college with a fervor that reflected his deep-seated desire to fight for justice. His acceptance into a prestigious law program brought waves of congratulations from friends, teachers, and even those who once doubted his place in their community. The town had grown to embrace him as one of their own, a beacon of potential they were proud to support. Alex felt a mixture of pride and nostalgia as he helped Marcu pack for school. The once small boy with wide, questioning eyes had grown into a confident young man who spoke about equality and fairness with the same passion Alex had always tried to nurture. "Dad," Marcu said one evening, folding a stack of clothes into a box, "I've been thinking about everything we went through. It's strange to look back and remember the hard times and realize how far we've come." Alex nodded, sitting on the edge of the bed. "It's those moments that make this even more meaningful. You and Amelia, you're proof that love changes everything." Marcu paused, his expression thoughtful. "I want to carry that with me, Dad. When I become a lawyer, I don't just want to win cases. I want to make sure people are heard, especially those who are silenced by others." The determination in Marcu's voice brought tears to Alex's eyes. He reached out, gripping Marcu's shoulder. "You already are making a difference, son, and I couldn't be prouder." On Marcu's last night at home, the family gathered in the living room for a final dinner before his departure. The warm glow of the kitchen lights cast a golden hue over the table, where Amelia's laughter rang out as she recounted a story from the hospital about a mischievous patient who had tested her patience in the kindest way. "Sounds like you handled it well, Dr. Amelia," Marcu teased, earning a playful swat from his sister. Alex took in the scene, the soft smiles and shared stories, and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. "This family started with a simple decision to choose love," he said, raising his glass. "And look where it's taken us, to new beginnings and continuing to make this world a better place." "To new beginnings," Amelia and Marcu echoed, their voices filled with hope. The next day, Alex drove Marcu to the university. The car ride was filled with a mix of comfortable silence and bursts of conversation about plans and dreams. When they arrived, Marcu took a deep breath as he stepped out of the car, looking up at the towering buildings that marked the start of a new chapter. "You're going to be amazing," Alex said, pride spilling from his words. They embraced tightly, the moment heavy with the significance of what lay ahead. "And remember, no matter where you go, this town, this family, we're always with you." Marcu nodded, his eyes glistening. "I know, Dad. I'll make you proud." "You already have," Alex whispered. Back in town, the absence of Marcu's constant presence was felt, but life continued with its newfound rhythm of unity. Amelia took on more responsibilities at the hospital, her dedication earning her the respect and admiration of patients and colleagues alike. She often thought back to the early days, when acceptance was scarce and whispers filled the air. Now, her days were filled with voices that spoke of trust and appreciation. One afternoon, as Amelia walked out of the hospital after a long shift, she noticed Mr. Jenkins, the hardware store owner, waiting for her. He held a bouquet of wildflowers, his hands trembling slightly. "Dr. Davidson," he said, clearing his throat, "these are for you. I just wanted to say thank you for everything you've done, not just for my family, but for this whole town. You've taught us more than I can say." Amelia's heart warmed as she accepted the flowers. "Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. But it's not just me. It's all of us learning together. As she walked home, the scent of the wildflowers mingled with the spring air, and Amelia knew that the seeds her father had planted long ago were now in full bloom. With Marcu pursuing justice and Amelia continuing her path in medicine, the Carter family's legacy of love and resilience set a standard in the town that would echo for generations to come. Years passed, and the town that had once been wary of change now stood as a testament to the power of empathy and perseverance. Alex watched with quiet pride as his children flourished, Marcu making waves in the legal world, and Amelia becoming a respected doctor whose compassion drew patients from nearby towns. But it wasn't just their achievements that filled him with joy. It was the way their journey had touched the community around them. Marcu's return visits from university were met with more than just family reunions. Neighbors would stop by to ask about his studies and share stories of how their own children were inspired by him. One summer evening, during a community barbecue at the town park, Marcu stood with a group of young teens, answering questions about law school and the challenges he had faced. "So, is it hard being different in a place where everyone expects you to be the same?" asked one boy, his wide eyes reflecting a blend of admiration and curiosity. Marcu smiled, his gaze shifting to where Alex was laughing with some old friends. "It was at first," he admitted, "but my dad always told me that what makes you different is what makes you powerful." And he was right. Standing out gives you a voice, and if you use that voice to help others, it's worth every challenge. The boy nodded thoughtfully, as if tucking the advice away for future use. Nearby, Amelia chatted with an older couple who had come to trust her after she'd helped their granddaughter through a serious illness. They spoke of how they once viewed the Carters with suspicion, but now couldn't imagine the town without them. The warmth of that summer night was a testament to the changes that had swept through their small community. The park, once a place where Alex had felt out of place pushing a stroller, now felt like an extension of home, filled with friendly faces and shared stories. Even those who had once been critical, like Mrs. Peterson and Mr. Wilkins, were now allies, sharing laughter and swapping tales as if they had always been friends. As the evening sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the park, Mayor Rodriguez took to the small stage that had been set up near the bandstand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called, raising his hand to quiet the crowd. "Tonight, we celebrate more than just a gathering. We celebrate who we have become, a community that embraces every member, learns from the past, and moves forward together." He turned to where Alex, Marcu, and Amelia stood, catching their eyes. And a big part of that lesson came from the Carter family, whose journey has shown us that love and determination can reshape even the deepest doubts. Applause swept through the crowd, warm and genuine. Alex felt Marcu's arm drape over his shoulders and saw Amelia's smile widen. The years of struggle, the lonely moments, and the doubts melted away in the face of this acknowledgement. It wasn't just a victory for their family, it was proof that hope could ripple outward, touching lives in ways that once seemed impossible. After the mayor's speech, Mr. Jenkins, the hardware store owner, stepped forward with a grin. "Well, Alex, looks like you're more popular than me these days," he joked, drawing laughter from the crowd. He handed Alex a plaque inscribed with words that made his heart swell, "For transforming hearts with love and strength." Alex accepted it, his throat tight with emotion. "Thank you," he managed, his voice breaking slightly. "But this isn't just about my family. It's about what we all did together. Change doesn't happen with one person. It happens when we decide to be better as a whole." The applause that followed resonated in the still night, as warm as the memories it held. Families gathered, sharing stories and laughter as the stars blinked into the sky above. Alex looked around, soaking in the moment. He reached out and squeezed Marcu's and Amelia's hands. "Look at us now," he whispered, barely audible above the happy chatter. Amelia nodded, her eyes shining. "It's everything you taught us, Dad." Marcu added, a touch of mischief in his smile, "And it's just the beginning." The Carters had once been the subjects of whispers and exclusion, but now they stood as symbols of what a community could achieve when love and forgiveness were allowed to lead the way. And as the night settled around them, Alex knew that their story was more than just a personal victory. It was a legacy of change that would last for generations. Bookmark. The journey of the Carter family from isolation to acceptance is more than just a story of overcoming obstacles. It's a testament to the power of love, resilience, and the courage to stand firm in the face of prejudice. Through Alex's unwavering belief in kindness, Marcu and Amelia were not only given a loving home, but also the tools to face a world that wasn't always welcoming. They turned that foundation into a legacy of compassion and strength, impacting their community in profound ways. This video reminds us that change begins with small acts of courage. Whether it's extending a helping hand to someone who has wronged you, or choosing to love without conditions, these actions plant seeds that can grow into transformation over time. The Carter story teaches us that real strength lies in forgiveness and empathy, and that unity is built when people open their hearts to one another. The lesson here is clear. Resilience and compassion can turn even the hardest hearts. By choosing love, we can create a ripple effect that goes far beyond what we might imagine, shaping not just our own lives but those around us. If you found this story touching, please comment with a 1. If you found it truly inspiring, comment with a 2. We'd love to hear your stories as well. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any of our upcoming inspirational stories. Share your thoughts about this journey in the comments below.